Hello, and welcome to The Deep Dive. I'm Bella Jacobs. The highly charged debate over whether to mine near Minnesota's Boundary Waters Canoe area has moved to a new chapter with President Donald Trump lifting a federal ban in late April. Twin Metals Minnesota LLC, a subsidiary of Chile-based company, wants to mine precious metals there and has promised an environmentally safe operation. But opponents fear contamination will flow through the wilderness area's watershed. But mining is not certain. The company is in a court battle over mining leases and would also need to permit from Minnesota. Today I am joined by Assistant Professor of Civil Engineering, Ali Ling, who has visited the Boundary Waters since childhood and has worked as a water consultant for mines to provide perspective on this topic. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here, Bella.
Professor Ling, as someone who enjoys spending time at the Boundary Water Canoe area, what does this place mean to you personally, and how does that shape the way you think about the prospect of mining in the area?
Yeah, so I'm a water engineer, part of the reason I went into water engineering and making water clean is because I love being on the water. So I grew up going to the Boundary Waters. We still go, take my family there, and it's just a really beautiful, peaceful place. So I am very invested in the ongoing quality of the Boundary Waters as a place where people can go and enjoy.
What are the economic opportunities and the environmental risks that come with mining near the Boundary Waters?
Mm-hmm. So the thing that I think sometimes gets missed in the conversation is that just because if a mine eventually gets built there, it doesn't mean that there will be environmental contamination. We absolutely have the technologies available to mine copper and nickel sulfides in a way that is environmentally friendly, such that the air, water, and solids from that process get captured and treated before being released. So there is certainly a way to do it. I think it really comes down to the controls that the state can put on it. So the two main things are permitting and penalties. So permitting is kind of the upfront thing in terms of how much planning and goes into it and what the mine company plans to do with the water and the air. So they have to put that all together beforehand, and it has to get approved by the state of Minnesota before anything can happen. And then the penalties part is once it's operating, what are the penalties that would be imposed on the mine if those permitting conditions were broken, or if they had a release to the environment that isn't allowed.
As I mentioned earlier, before mining can begin, a couple hurdles remain, including the Minnesota DNR permitting process. How does that work, and how tough is it?
Yeah, it's a very involved permitting process. So there are permits related to water, to air, to the mining process. So Twin Metals has been in the process of planning and trying to get these permits for about 20 years. It's not like they're new to the game here. I also want to mention Minnesota is a big mining state. We mine more iron than any other state in the United States. I'm sure everyone here has used Minnesota mined irons, which means that the state of Minnesota has a lot of practice working with mines and trying to prevent that environmental contamination. So the permitting process, there's a bunch of requirements that the state can put on that the mine needs to do. The two ones that I think are the most significant for these mines, the first one is regarding the water quality that can come out of these mines. There's a rule in the state of Minnesota that is meant to protect wild rice. And it says that if a mine company or any other discharge is going to waters that will have wild rice in them or have wild rice downstream, they need to be treated to a certain standard. And that standard is the strictest standard in the world for this type of compound. And with the technologies we have available today, it essentially means that any water coming out of the mine and being released to the environment needs to be treated with reverse osmosis. So reverse osmosis you might have that in your kitchen, under your sink, that takes the very clean tap water and makes it extra clean to drink. So the outcome of that rule being applied to the permitting process is that the plan has to involve reverse osmosis and treatment to basically drinking water standards before it can be released to the environment. The other thing about permitting that I think is really important is there's this clause about financial assurance. So the things can happen when you're mining or doing big stuff. And the financial assurance clause means that the mining company, whoever's planning it, needs to look ahead and think about what could go wrong. And they have to put aside the money to clean up all of that stuff under a whole bunch of different scenarios about things that could go wrong. They have to give that money to the state before they can even start mining, so that if something happens, if they go bankrupt, if some weird thing happens, the state has the money to take care of things.
What are the biggest water quality risks associated with precious metal mining near areas like the Boundary Waters?
I mean, I think the risks are similar anywhere. I don't think they're necessarily higher near the Boundary Waters or elsewhere in terms of just what the potential changes in water quality are. I think the way that the mine is planned, it will include a very strict treatment such that the water, if everything is going as planned, as designed, the water coming out of that mine will be pretty similar to drinking water. It's not going to be dirty. I think the risks are if they get the permit and that is the plan, and if something were to happen later where there's some sort of a release or some sort of a malfunction where some water is released in a not planned way. So I think the way that the state of Minnesota has control over that potentially is through the penalties that can be put onto mines and companies that are not meeting their permits.
The Boundary Waters are a system of interconnected lakes. How does this interconnectedness make contamination more difficult to contain?
I'm not really sure I understand the question. Are you saying that it would make it more difficult to contain?
Yeah, so if the water were to be contaminated, since it is connected to various different lakes, would it be more difficult to contain because it's not just one body of water, it's connected to multiple?
I mean, potentially. I think it kind of depends on which direction you're going. Water is all going to flow downhill. So if it flows into a certain lake, it's going to flow downhill from there. It's not going to go uphill to lakes that are upstream. So that's similar to any sort of river system. The water's always going to flow downhill. So the things that could potentially get contaminated if something were to happen are the lakes and the streams and the waters that are downhill.
If toxic chemicals do leak into the watershed, what steps would be taken to mitigate or repair the damage?
Yeah, I don't actually know what is planned there. I think that the plan is to treat the water so that this doesn't happen. And I think that is what we should go on. And Minnesota has very strict permitting policies to make sure that a good plan is put into place. And then I think there just needs to be penalties that are commensurate with the potential impact to a place like the Boundary Waters to incentivize the mining company to stay with the plan that whatever the state approves.
And what are some ways that the public can make their voices heard on this complex topic?
Yeah, I think it's a very challenging topic, and we just talked about water quality today. We're not talking about other ramifications of the bill. It's things with public lands, things with tribal treaties. There's a lot of things going on with this bill that I don't have expertise in, so I'm not going to speak to those things. But surrounding water quality, I think there's an understanding of, having the understanding that we have the technology to make it so that a mine does not equal contamination of the Boundary Waters, and then trying to support and advocate for the state of Minnesota being able to impose penalties that are of similar magnitude to the risks to the Boundary Waters. The other thing is that there's no such thing as a zero risk scenario, right? We all drive our cars every day and there's a risk of dying from that kind of thing. So the question with this type of thing is, how low is the risk and is it worth what you would get? And the thing that I think doesn't come into the conversation enough is, what do we get from having a copper nickel mine in Minnesota? So copper and nickel are both important materials that are used in renewable energy infrastructure, things like solar panels, wind, and we're not mining enough of that to build out our energy infrastructure as currently planned by not the current federal administration, but by previous clean energy plans. So the choice to not mine this copper would mean we potentially have less green energy if there's a federal move towards more green energy in the future. So there's other factors. It's not just that we would mine it because we want to make this company a huge scads of money. I think it would be that we could potentially mine it to provide more copper and nickel for society. And most of us use computers and electricity and the electrical grid. So I think there's the question of, are we going to choose to mine here where we can do it cleanly and we have the state of Minnesota with strict permitting policies and it's very likely to happen without environmental impacts? Or are we going to keep the same way of life and rely on copper and nickel that are mined elsewhere where there are less stringent permitting and the risk of environmental damage is almost certainly higher? So that's kind of something that I think you need to balance and weigh in as individual consumers.
Well, thank you for speaking with me today, Professor Ling. Follow along at thecrest.news and follow us on social media at The Crest News for more stories from your campus community. With Professor Ali Ling, I'm Bella Jacobs. We'll see you next time we deep dive.